some of these brands that are out there now, they're almost connecting to you emotionally.
Oh my gosh, yes. And is that ever more important?
Yeah.
I remember years ago reading Tony Robbins, and he, this Robbins Research Company, he
Hmm.
owns this company that's designed to just try to figure out, well, what can he do and how can he do it better, you know? And he's trying to help people, right? Isn't that what his whole program is all about?
Yeah,
Empower.
he's got an amazing story.
He
Amazing
does.
story.
And he mentioned that the only time anyone ever goes from one group to a higher group, and that's what we're trying to help people do. That's what we're trying to do ourselves,
Yep.
is to help. Uh, they change their peer group,
Yeah.
and, and the reality is sometimes, you know, um, I guess the problems that you run into changing your peer group is you don't want to get rid of your old friends that are telling you, you know, you can't do. There's no way you're ever going to make any money in real estate. There's no way you're going to be able to form your own company. There's, you know, whatever it is, you know, that where we.
Forgive me if I start using buzzwords like limiting beliefs. And when I was in my 20s, I got the opportunity to move from Seattle, Washington, a very thriving city, to Albion, New York, which is a very, it wasn't thriving as much. But that change and that move and those alterations from New York to Texas and Texas back to Seattle, and the interactions with your group and how we ran into each other, um, that's probably been the biggest thing that's ever happened to me was I seeked new people and I seeked out change where a lot of people don't.
Right. Yeah. And yeah, you nailed it right there.
As we age and as we go through our own personal development, I'm always seeking people that are wiser than me,
Mhm.
and I'm always looking for mentors. I seek everyone's advice, but there are some people here that, like some of these real estate gurus and stuff that we've worked for, um, we may have a different approach, and that's okay.
Right. Absolutely. And we need one. I mean, the world today, uh, it's not what it was yesterday. And I mean, I met with a good friend of mine who has done many, many rehabs successfully, including those historical homes. He's
Those
he's
are hard.
yeah, those are not easy, and you have to get the right people and all that sort of thing. So he's
Yeah.
done the whole bit, and not in just in one city. He's from Atlanta. He's done Atlanta. He's done what's the big Carolina city in the Carolinas?
Not Charlotte, was it?
Charlotte. Yeah, I think it is
Okay.
Charlotte.
Yeah.
And
Great opportunities in Atlanta and Charlotte. I mean, massive growth city, still very low property values. That's another thing that I realized, Ted, working around the nation, is so many people are focused on their microclimate, and there's people here in Buffalo that they're buying these houses for a few hundred thousand, and I'm looking at it compared to the San Antonio market and going, man, these prices are way out of line. And, looking at Charlotte and looking at some of these, I think that's a limiting belief when we talk about real estate and how you got to change your peer group in anything that you do is your microclimate, your immediate circle, whether it's geographic in the area that you grew up or in your business or whatever. You got to look at what's going on. I mean, we won't talk about and compare what's going on in America versus, say, Hong Kong or China, Japan. I mean, there's some things going on over there that are 15, 20 years ahead of our technology right now.
and that's a sad thing to admit. You know what I mean? It
Yeah,
really
I
is.
don't like. I don't even want to talk about that. Like, we got to focus on our microclimate. So as we're talking about this, like, we got to understand that the world is ever more connected. Pre-internet telephones, pre-freeway, Model A cars and horse and buggy, we can now, you and I can have a conversation like this very easily in 2 different states and break the borders, break the time zones, break these barriers down. But a lot of people haven't changed their peer group. And, my grandma who's 85 years old, her and I can get on Facebook and we can get on video calls and we can do this because she was forced, because I left. Families have gone, but there's a lot of people that haven't been forced. And sorry to use some of my analogies, but right now with what's going on in the world, I feel like I'm teaching a lot of people how to program a VCR, and programming VCRs is way out of date.
Yes, programming VCR is, that's a good example. What may also be out of date is, it's never out of date. Real estate is always a great market, but
25% of GDP, always. Quarter of every dollar made in the world.
Right, but since our economy is down 25%, so is our real estate, if you know what I'm saying. And you have to be careful what you pay for something. And there's, the day that we recognized the coronavirus, some people recognized it way earlier than others. And
I saw the '08 crash. I was in it. So when I saw this, I saw every single indicator. And I was telling people, this is about to happen. They're like, Blake, you're crazy. Economics are great. Housing market's great. And I'm like, no, I'm seeing not one indicator, not 2 indicators, not 3 indicators. I'm triaging this as a patient, and I'm looking at it going, okay, pivot my investments, look at new things. Like, I've been tapping around in cryptocurrencies, and I shifted a lot of my stock market. And I was telling a couple of my house flippers here, get rid of your houses quick. And they're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, the market is about to crash. And I've been here for a year now, and they're like, what are you talking about? And I said, I can get a 3,000 square foot house for the same price you guys are spending on a 1,200 square foot house here. South Texas has a booming economy. Buffalo has a declining economy. Like, the numbers and the variables just don't match. But keeping on the topic of changing your peer group, everyone here is only here. They don't have a portfolio outside of here. They don't know, except for one gentleman, and we'll name names, Mr. Chris Noggle, which I met him, and he has properties in Florida, and he has a reach nationally, and he's changed his local peer group here in Buffalo, which is very few people. And he looked at me and he laughed and he got it.
Yeah, there you go. And
one person.
And I am in the same boat as him. I own property in Florida. I own 2 plots of land in Sarasota, actually in Northport, which is the fastest growing area in the country, I'm told. And also own in Sun City Center, which is a retirement community. And even though the economy is bad and everything, I'm rented for the next year anyway. And
you bought in. You bought in at the right price. I mean, business 101, right? There's never a bad deal. It's just the right price. I mean, I worked in the car business for a little bit, just like the real estate business. Like, you can flip cars just like you can flip houses if you know how to buy them.
Well, I got a guy that does that just exactly. He flips cars like houses, and he sells them to the dealers.
The wholesalers a car wholesaler. I mean, that is a whole industry.
Yeah. So that there's opportunities today that, and I like that the Chinese expression of a crisis. They use two what do you call it, symbols. One is tragedy, I think, or something like that. So and the other is opportunity. And so I
love Eastern cultures and signs and symbols because they get so interpreted. That's one of the downfalls I think that we have in Western society is we're we're so much after today and immediate results. And that's one of the biggest things that when I saw some very successful house flippers is the fix and flip versus the fix and hold, and the whole debate going back and forth, right? Like, there's
Sure.
not a wrong strategy. I've seen people make millions in both. I've seen people make millions in wholesale because they're just good at it. But you know, we've heard this in the stock market, right? Diversifying your portfolio, or at least being prepared for market changes. And if you haven't changed your peer group, and if you're not seeking outside, I mean, I'm so glad that we connected. We've been connected for a long time. We ran into each other how many years ago now? 5 years ago with David.
Yeah, and it
Probably
could have
more.
been a little longer than that. It could have been 6. I'm not sure,
Yeah.
something like that. But
But we've been connected on LinkedIn. I've seen some of your posts. You've probably seen some of my posts. And that's the power of digital now. Like, we're having this conversation. So when we change our peer groups, it's very easy to have a mastermind type of organization that is reaching past borders. And I think that's what digital and technology has allowed us to do. It's a very distractive tool, and it's a very disruptive tool, but it can also be highly enabling when utilized correctly.
oh, no question about that. And you know what you're talking about here, and what we're really trying to get to next, as far as we have so much going on right now that is so different than what it's ever been before, and so, you know, so much of a setback to so many people. We have to be able to see ourselves and our environment and everything as we want it to be, not as it necessarily is right now. But we
Yeah.
have to be able to function within that world that we live in. But we have to have a vision of where we are trying to go and seeing ourselves there.
Yeah.
And that's just, I would love to get this going with enough other people that we could, you know, really, really get into this. Um, you know,
And solve problems
yeah,
and take action.
right, right,
You know,
exactly.
it's easy to network, right? And it's easy to have these conversations. And as momentum goes, I think the value statement is like-minded people. So our main focus is going to be real estate conversations and real estate topics. But I just listened to Guy Kawasaki, who helped create the Macintosh with Steve Jobs. And there's this YouTube video out there called The Art of Innovation. And he gives you this top 10 things. It's like some California, Stanford, or I forget which one, so don't quote me. But the part that like really got me in these top 10 things was number 3, and it was called jump curves. So when we jump curves, think about this and correlate it from horse and buggy to automotive. But what he did was he correlated it to the ice industry. So in the early 1900s, ice cutters used to go out there on lakes and block ice, and it was millions of pounds. And innovation to these ice block people in the 1900s were bigger saws, bigger sleds, bigger horses. That was innovation to them.
Sure.
Until 30 years later, 1930s, there was the ice factory. So the ice factory broke down those barriers and said, wait a minute, we don't need a lake. We don't need Western New York and our Arctic climates to bring ice down here. We can make ice factories. So, the ice factory brought the Iceman, and it brought ice delivery to your houses in the early 1930-ish timeframe. Well, then 30 years later, so, 1950s, 1960s, we now have the ice box. And that's jumping these curves in innovation. And what we are experiencing right now today is we've been in this curve since 1992, 1989. Think about when the internet was invented. Think about when the smartphone was invented by our friend Steve Jobs in 2007-ish, that our so-called smartphone went from a dumb wired phone to a dumb cordless phone to a dumb flip phone, now to a computer in our hand, and now cameras in front of our faces and stuff like that.
Absolutely. It's a
it takes
change. I mean, that that I can remember, gosh sakes, Blake, back in the, 60s, even in Monterey City. My mom's family came from Pennsylvania coal, the anthracite, hard coal
yeah,
mining areas.
here
They were
still
still
that
they were
mindset.
still delivering ice,
Hmm.
and everybody
The
else in
ice
the world had
boxes
a
were over
refrigerator.
here. Yeah. So
And
that's what we're experiencing now, Ted, is we're experiencing, say, Western New York, which I love the people here, but it was a Rust Belt manufacturing city that has been in a decline since the 60s, and the steel industry has left. So there's been oppression, depression, and the generations that have stayed haven't seen innovation. Where I grew up in Seattle and the West Coast, in Utah, we have Adobe, and in Seattle, we have Microsoft and all these other things, and we have PayPal down south, and we have Nike in Portland. Like, these guys were innovators in the 80s and the 90s, and this wave is finally hitting us, and it's going to crash harder in the rural cities. It's going to crash harder in the places, in the businesses, whether you're real estate or you're a technology company or a retail company. So this means mass opportunity for the
it,
right people
it
with the
means
right
mass
mindset.
opportunity, but you have to be careful there. I remember, sakes, when
Hmm.
I was in college, I had a H&E, I think it was K&E slide rule, which was
Okay.
considered la creme, the finest slide rule, that you could make. And then I remember a few years later reading an article about how they missed the boat and didn't grasp the technology change, and that,
Yep.
and they should have been into calculators and everything. Hey, let me ask you a question. What did they know about calculators? They knew where to buy the right kind of wood and, do three different kinds of wood in their, glued
Yep.
together in their slide rule with a plastic outer
Right.
edge or whatever. I mean, so that's what they knew. So, sometimes you have to say, hey, wait a minute, I better quit trying to sell buggy whips here, because,
Yeah.
right
Well,
now we're driving cars.
yeah, going back to the ice example and Guy Kawasaki's video, Art of Innovation, um, the ice delivery guys, they were not the same people. So at the end of his video, he's like, here's an example, and I'm gonna look over at my other screen. Um, I think there is a world market for maybe 5 computers. A gentleman named Thomas Watson of IBM in 1942. The telephone has too many shortcomings to seriously be considered a means of communication. The device is inherently no value to us. An internal communication from Western Union.
Mm.
Like, it's never going to be the same people, because those people were stuck, and they had their blinders on, and just like Blockbuster Video lost to Netflix. They didn't lose to Netflix because Blockbuster was digital or didn't go digital fast enough and Netflix was digital. They lost because the customer experience. Look at what's going on in the real estate world and how many agents talk smack about Zillow and talk smack about this. Look at how many real estate agents did not invest in virtual tours and 360 pictures and a good website. Guess what? The ones that did are still having open houses, are still able, not as well because of all this stuff going on, but still able to conduct business at some level, where the ones that didn't adapt. And that's where, changing your peer group, you got to get outside of your circle. And you gotta remember, I don't know whose quote, and you probably know, it's like you're the combination of the 5 people that you hang around with, you stick with. Like,
Sure.
surround yourself with smarter people constantly.
Well, not only that, but smarter people in the right way. At being smart,
Yeah. Yeah.
I know some of my friends, I have friends that are just brighter than you can imagine, but it's not going anywhere. It's they're not able to monetize that. They're not able to really, they're very cool at a party to talk with them, because they have some really nifty ideas.
Fun stories. Yeah.
And right now, one of the things that I've found over the years for myself, if I'm just chasing the money, if that's all I see is the money, I'm not helping anybody else and I'm not helping myself. And I don't get the money. I mean, and I was going to give you some examples. I think that you have to have a vision of what you're trying to do. Even if you have the money, you'll lose it. Uh,
Hmm.
the,
Hmm.
I think her name is Molly. I was watching a movie called Molly's Game, and it was about this lady who was in the Salt Lake Olympics. In the beginning part, she was trying to qualify, and she was number one. And
Hmm.
coming down on her last run, she's coming down, and her foot clipped a pine tree that was coming up through the snow enough that hit the binder, the latch on the binder, and it blew that off. And end of her career, she really messed up her back and everything
Yeah.
else. But she ended up being running poker games, and it's amazing the people that have a lot of money, actors, um, baseball players, and stuff. And we all know that what, like they say, is 5 years after their career is over, most of those people
They're
are
over.
broke. Well, they're throwing their money. They don't. That money has no purpose to them, no meaning to them. It's not.
No.
They have
It's
no
like a
future.
lotto winner. I guess most of the lotto winners end up losing their money, just like a bunch of secondary or second generation trust fund kids and people that their parents created some great business and then handed them over some inheritance and they blew it up. Like, you need to earn it. But going back to what you were saying, one of the things that has always stuck in my mind, I doubt I created this, was wealth is the exhaust, money is the exhaust. Heart, transparency, servant leader, that's the
Mhm.
gas. It's not. People chase the money thinking the money is the gas. The gas is your heart. It's you. And, I've seen some very successful real estate people, and I've always wondered, and I've seen some very rich people, and I'm like, how did they do it? They're not good people. But I realized, I'm like, they're not happy on the inside. They're hollow on the inside. They have challenges. And, I think what we're experiencing too now in the world is business is now becoming more transparent to that. And due to the age of information, if you don't come with a servant heart, if you don't come with a real mission, and it's triple bottom line companies or dual mission companies. So if you're starting a real estate business or whatever, what are you doing for the community? If you're trying to make millions of dollars flipping houses, what's the purpose? Because if the purpose is just making millions of dollars, you're gonna chase your tail like a dog.
A hearty amen to you there. And as we see the need for change, uh, and what we're doing, and what we're thinking about, we, most of us, that anybody who would listen to this or talk with us in the future, uh, have a feeling for the 80-20 theory, that 20% of what you do during the day gets you 80% of your results, and 20% of your sales force brings
Yeah.
in 80% of the customers, and 20% of the customers bring 80% of the business. And
Revenue.
it
Yeah.
just goes on and on and on. Uh, but, and that's one of the reasons that in this slide that we have here, where it says attack with power, and behind that is a Mandelbrot fractal. And the fractal is, it's interesting, and it's, since we've got the computers now, and the power to go many generations deep, we can see that this fractal repeats itself within itself. It's the same way as the shoreline.
Oh, I've heard about that. I think, yeah,
It's
yeah, and it's all a repeat, like the 1.4, like, yeah, yeah.
So I did, and my wife struggled with it when I wrote about it, and she says, "Well, you need to do the math." Okay, because people don't understand the math, and that's why they're, if you're a math teacher, you can pretty much always get a job teaching school. You know what I mean? Because not very many people want to teach math. But the the formula that if it is a fractal, if the 80/20 theory is a fractal, then
Okay.
20% of the people that your clients bring you 80% of the business, and 20% of the 20% bring you 80% of the 80%, and so on, 20 of the 20, and
Constantly
means
refining.
means that instead of 20% bringing 80%, we have 4% bringing 64%, and we have less than 1% of our clients bringing 40% of our business. And I
That's
presented.
funny, Ted, because when I've done a lot of business consulting, I do operational excellence, I do digital and sales. You know what? Most of my clients, I bet you, if I took those analytics, you're probably right on, within a few percentage. And I've seen so many businesses, you don't want to be 80% heavy on your portfolio and all that. But the truth is, most businesses coming from like a small percent is probably 60 something percent is their most profitable people.
Exactly. Well, I brought this up one time. I was talking to a bunch of sales guys from a very
Uh-oh.
big car
I'm
dealership.
sorry.
And one guy says, "Ted, you are dumber than a goody bird." If that doesn't work, do you realize Procter and Gamble, do you know how big they are? Do you know how many accounts they have? And I said, "Well, I'm not really sure exactly how big they are, but I do know they get about 25% of their business from one client." you
Yeah.
Which is
So
true.
if they had just
Walmart
a
is their
couple
biggest.
more of those one clients, then that's 60 something percent of their business.
So all these people that are scared that they can't find the
Hmm.
right clients for their business, and that they need thousands of them or whatever, you may want to rethink that. Maybe you only need one or two, you know. And we could go. I could talk to you about this fractal thing and about how it affects multi-level marketing, and why multi-level marketing is so difficult is because you have to violate the laws of nature to have two downlines.
Yeah, well, yeah, affiliate marketing, I love it when you're on the top. And when you
Exactly.
already have a huge existing network, it becomes very easy because, if I was a ex-NFL player with, a 500,000 followers, I could sell some Organo Gold, some Kiani, some Amazon, Amway, insert whatever affiliate marketing you love to hate.
Yeah.
Um, that's the secret sauce. I've worked with companies and helped develop those on the back end, and there's companies that have downline software. There's companies that have all this stuff, and in the real estate guru world, when you see things from the inside, it's a little exposure of the truth, and it makes you question. But that's one of the things that I think what we're trying to do here too is uplift, rise the tide, enlighten some people to get them to grow in this changing world.
And that is why, Blake, that is why it's on there, and it's kind of to be humorous, I guess. I write down there's only four people that you need to impress, when you're trying to break into a new world, a new client.
Should probably write this down. Hopefully, I'm impressing the right four
Well,
people.
the four people are Zeus, Thor, Venus, and the goddess Diana. I joke about that, but every company has people who can help you, that they're decision makers. If you're trying to swim upstream, talking to some bottom level, purchasing agent or what,
Gatekeeper.
you got to break through to the person that can make the decision. That's the bottom line. That's where we need to
Yeah.
be. And
Well, we can, and I can talk about all of that stuff for hours upon hours, and branding and sales and marketing and digital, and how, like, let's use an example of a company that everyone looks at as like oh, I can't be like that, say Amazon. You know, the way they've broke through is through appropriate messaging. and they've pulled back to that message of, convenience or whatever. But explain to me, like, this whole Zeus, Venus, and what did Diana, what was the other one?
The goddess Diana, Zeus, Thor, Venus. I joke because I say you need to talk with every company has a handful of people who everybody can say no, but there's only a few people who can say yes to your efforting, whatever it is you're trying to get their change of action, trying to
Yeah.
get them to get into whatever it is that you're talking about. You have to reach the right people, otherwise you're spitting in the wind. And
When I was consulting with ADP, we did HR consulting, and my decision maker was a CFO, was a CEO. You know how hard it is to get to those guys, but once you get to those guys, it's a lot easier to get pushed down than to get pushed up.
it's you're so right. And there's so many things that you can bring into this. The law of seven touches. I mean, you can't get into these people your first shot, but you got to keep shooting. You got to keep efforting. You've got to find different ways.
Different angles, yeah.
When I first learned this law of seven touches, where you have to touch people 7 times before you can get them to change their way of thinking towards your way of thinking, I said, oh my gosh, I got to, do something. So I was calling people to death, if you know what I mean. I keep calling them and calling them and calling them.
Cold call, yeah.
Whatever it is, And then my daughter comes in one time listening to me doing this, and she says, Dad, what are you, a stalker? That's the term that kids use.
Yeah, those millennial kids, which, I can be one of them or not.
Then I went back to what I was thinking of, when I was courting my wife, I guess. I asked her out. What did she say? Let me see if I can remember. Oh yeah, no.
Oh yeah, no.
So I mean, I did the flower bit, the card, the calls, the visits. I mean, I did a lot of different things.
You broke down barriers. Let's just say you broke down barriers. She saw the sincerity.
If you just call people, that won't work.
No.
If you do a mass attack in a lot of different ways, that can really help you.
You got to do it tactfully. I mean, it can come across very distractive.
It can. Years ago, I worked for a company that sold printing in Cleveland. Very few people know that Cleveland is the second largest city for Fortune 500 companies. The Fortune 500.
Morgan Chase.
For some reason, the Fortune 5 companies are there. Now, this is years ago, and when I hired on with this company, my boss said, here's the people we want you to call on. He named all these big companies. It kind of scared me to go after these big companies. He says, but when you go in there to see these people, you'll be as welcome as the flowers in May. He says, here's why. We have been sending these people free, scratch pads and message pads and all kinds of free stuff. And so they know who we are. You know what I mean? And so when you come in there and we've been treating them right,
they're gonna love you. They're gonna love you, Ted.
And he was right. What happened is I started with a purchasing agent, and I said, I know you buy a lot of printing here. It was Republic Steel I was talking with. I said, I know you buy a lot of printing, and I don't want to interfere with what you're doing that's working. But if you've got something that you need in a hurry, maybe it's just a small order and nobody's interested in it or something, I'll come over and take care of, I'll do what I can to take care of you. Well, he had so much grief going on in his life where people wanted this piece of printing fast or whatever. He was always being shoved into this situation where he didn't know what he was doing. Now he had to buy this stuff. So he sent me into the back room somewhere with one of their guys that buys printing and designs the forms and all of that sort of stuff, And that guy, he says to me, takes I think it was like a 11-part, tear apart, carbonized form. And he says, what could you do for me on this? And he hands it to me, and I took a pen, which is what I was taught to do by my boss. And I took one of the letter zeros on there, O, and I put my pen and I pushed down real hard, and I looked down into the 11th copy. That pen was right on into that zero. And I said, this is a very difficult form. It had die cut carbons and all. I said, it's a very difficult form to print. If this is very, very good quality work. Unless these people are really gouging you, I would, treat them like visiting royalty when they come in, and let them have that form, let them take care of you on that. But when you have, and then I repeated myself about when you have something that's just a small job or something, nobody's interested in coming over to work that you need done real fast. You may need it tomorrow, whatever it is. I'm right here locally. Give me a chance. Pretty soon, I own most of their business, if you know what I'm saying. Republic Steel, we're doing a lot of printing too. So it's kind of funny how you got to get into the right person. That's what we're really trying to get that point across to people.
Yeah.
Is it's the right person for the right situation. And that's what you and I need to think that way. Anyone who might listen to this needs to think that way for their business. And I especially hope we're helping young people that are getting started that really, don't have the knowledge or experience that you have, Blake, or that I have. May God help us, please. All of us.
Well, and think about this. Like we talk about, digital's so confusing and how sales have changed. You're gonna look at my stuff. I'm gonna not cold calling all day long, but I do it in a different way. We have these channels to reach a bigger masses, and we have ways of getting our reach faster, but we got to understand it can't be transactional, and it can't ever replace the personal. And throughout history, it's always been relationships. So, I can sell all day long how powerful digital is and how you need to, do all this stuff with inbound marketing and all of this fun stuff. But you know what? It doesn't matter until you have a personal relationship. You don't but then the masses, like when you and I, as an example, West Coast, East Coast, our reaches are already nationwide. So once we refine, we get all of this stuff down, we're going to hopefully rise the tide and help, people with their businesses, whether it's, them getting out of their peer group and being more susceptible to change and new ideas and get out of their comfort zones and maybe join, there's this big difference between a networking group and a mastermind group. Teaching them that it's not about the money and it's about the heart, and maybe they're in the wrong job because they're just not happy, and that one's a hard one. I mean, that's a hard one. But sales is sales, and it's always been relationship. It's just we can reach people with a better relationship a lot harder, a lot faster, and the world's full of distractions. I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm getting I'm getting a few a day. Meeting requests, new Zoom requests, new this group's doing this group's doing this, join this networking group, join this, do that. And I'm like, it's all just noise, just like a bad advertising and marketing trying to distract me right now. And we got to stay focused. We got to stay focused on creating these effective action-based peer groups. And I think that's really the goal here, right, is to invite other experts in, share this information, and develop something that's that can help people take action to better improve themselves and their businesses. And like you said, God help us now. I mean, you can't refuse to adapt now.
Right. Oh, and we all need to, and we need to take this game to another level. Well, Blake, it's awesome visiting with you on this. Let me ask you this. Because there's a bunch of different subjects we should probably be talking about. I would like to be able to get this, maybe change, as you were talking, change some of the pictures that you see. We've got this one slide up right now,
Yep.
but so that people can maybe even make it more empowered, because we do want to be of help. That's our main goal here, to be of help to other people and to get them maybe to want to be a part of what we're doing here. You know what I mean? And see if we
Yeah.
can't get them to want to know who we are. So, Blake, why don't you give us your contact information? How would somebody reach you if they want to
The
reach you?
easiest thing is I bought a domain called BlakeLeMoi.com. That is actually just getting rerouted to LinkedIn. LinkedIn is probably the best way.
Well,
Um,
let's spell the name because not everybody knows how to spell LeMoi.
well, thankfully everyone knows how to spell Blake, right?
Would hope
So
so.
yeah, so Blake Blake, but last name Lemoy Lemoi, and I created a company to help businesses with digital transformation, data analytics, sales, marketing, operations. I help people go through these journeys, and it's called 180, and that's just with one E, so ONEIGHTY.io. So 180 degrees.io with good input, good output is how businesses do this. So, that's been my passion, that's been my dream. And when we interacted in the real estate world, that's what I was helping. Um, and yeah, I think, we had a few conversations and that's great. And of course, I guess tell the people about how to get a hold of you and where to, where to ask the right appropriate questions your direction.
Well, thank you, Blake. Everybody, I'm Ted Wood. That's my name. And I, just give you an idea of some of who I am and what I've done and that sort of thing. One, I am a certified professional behavior analyst. I'm a certified life coach. I used to be I used to teach people how to run the offices where you did financial planning. So I was
Okay.
really into, and I'm graduate in accounting, so I understand the numbers. I've worked over the years as a one-on-one consultant to a lot of top business people, but it's the help that I've been able to get to people has been more of a helping them get past themselves, helping them to gain their faith, that sort of a thing. Now,
Hmm.
I started that and I realized this is kind of an interesting thing, Blake, is that I worked with all these small and medium sized businesses. My gosh, uh, over 100 of them. And I looked at what happened. These people, how much, who's making money, whose business is really thriving. And the people that owned real estate for their business. Maybe they had a building that they were
Yeah.
in or whatever, but there was extra room and they were renting out what they weren't using and that sort of thing. And then they trudged along with their, uh, electrical engineering, putting in the electricity, uh,
Yeah.
wiring and all that sort of stuff, different places. Those people were very successful if they owned some of their own real estate. The ones that, and that's how I got more into helping people invest in real estate, is
Okay.
because it works. We were talking about that earlier. It
Yeah.
works. The business people that did not own their own business but worked for someone else, eventually they really got themselves in trouble because their landlord would just keep, you making a little bit more money, let me raise the rent. You know what I mean? How's that going to work for you?
Well, there's the Ray Kroc founders movie. I mean, look at the way McDonald's made their money. You think it was burgers? It was real estate.
Well, the interesting about that is that they were charging a 3% franchise fee, but it was
Mhm.
barely enough to keep the business alive. And the businesses weren't happy. And when
Nope.
he said to them, well, what if I could guarantee you that you're going to be able to make this much money and all, you wouldn't mind paying, would you? No, not
Yep.
at all. That's the thing that got him into the real estate. The people wanted a place where they would go. Very few people know this about Ray Kroc and how he decided where to put those McDonald's. But what he looked for is church steeples. Could he see churches? And if he could get three churches around, he wanted to find a place between three churches.
Because those
Because
are community places.
if you and I go out and you go out and eat a burger for lunch, or I eat a burger for lunch, whoopie doo dah. But if we take our whole family out there to eat. McDonald's makes a lot more money. And so that was their thinking. And that was hence getting where all the families are. If there's churches, there's families. And
Yeah.
that worked for them. Now, it's interesting, every business is different. Crazy little things all of a sudden open the door, and you're making way more money than you were before. You never realized it until you made this one little change, you know what I mean? And boom.
Oh, I mean, talk about change. I mean, Starbucks at one time was selling beans, and then they were serving coffee in their one little store. And, the new CEO's like, hey, why don't we stop, focusing on 90% bean sales, and why don't we, start making coffee? They go from one location to hundreds and hundreds to thousands, and half the time, ever. Like scalability. And I think one of the things that I've also noticed, there's a lot of complacency. There's a lot of comfortable business owners that they created just a job, and technically they don't want to change their peer group. They don't want to grow. They don't want to go past it, and that's fine. That's this. These conversations hopefully will be enlightening for them, but I want people that are lifelong learners, and I want people that are seeking better value to join this conversation, put in input on things they want to hear. I mean,
Well,
sales,
I think we
marketing.
can do exactly that. That's
Yeah,
my dream. That's your dream. And I think we probably want to put this up, what we've said so far, put it up on LinkedIn, make
yep,
a YouTube video, whatever. And as far
yep,
as like reaching me, people can reach me, Coach Ted Wood at Gmail.
cool.
They can find me on LinkedIn, Ted Wood. And they can find me on Facebook, Ted Wood or Theodore Wood. That's another mistake I made. I have two Facebook accounts. It's kind of silly, but that was a mistake I made early on, years and years and years ago. And I've never used it, but I'm Ted's a Coach on Twitter. I did post. I'm posting videos there now as we create them. I'll probably post this one there. That would only make sense, Blake.
Right.
And I'll get your number and stuff up on the screen and mine too, and so that people do know how to reach us and that sort of thing. And
Yeah. So the rally call is, who wants to join this conversation? Who wants to add value? Who's looking for change and improvement? Those are the type of conversations. I can talk sales, marketing, data, analytics. I mean, the psychology of it, the coaching of it. A lot of people underestimate what a coach, what a personal development coach. But you know what? You look at all the successful people. They've all had coaches. They've all had mentors.
oh, amen.
And like you need to seek out and good information, like you said, but you need to seek out the right mentors and the right coaches.
Exactly. Well, and one of the things that I want to visit on in the future is, just start with from the most simplistic approach. What are we trying to do? Well, number one, I don't care whether you're in the real estate trying to look for another deal, or you've just been downsized and you're looking for a job, or you're
Yep.
trying to build a consulting business, or whatever it is that you're trying to do. Number one, you got to find, where are the deals? Where are the deals?
Yeah.
How do I
Where's your
present?
targets? What's your why? Why do they care to even listen to you?
Right. Who do I target and how do I target them? And
Yep.
then how do how do I close those deals? Close them. How do I make that happen? And then thirdly, and very, very important, people that go into business, whatever it is, even if you're going into, you've been working for somebody as a landscape artist, and now all of a sudden you're going to go out and work with people and mow their lawn for them or plant their flowers or whatever it is. It doesn't matter whether you're doing that or whether you're being a consultant. People don't realize you have a job and you get paid for your 40 hours of work that you do every week. Now, as a consultant or an independent lawn specialist or whatever you are, architect, whatever, 1/3 of the time that you have, and energy and money and everything else that you put in your business got to be finding more accounts. How do I do that? How do I increase my business? 1/3 of your time is managing that business, and you've only got 1/3 left to actually do what you're going to do. And people think, oh, geez, I'm making all this more money per hour now than I used to make. But you find out that you can't get 40 hours of work actually in front of people getting paid for it, because you'd have to be working 120 hours a week to do that. Well, I mean, if you're young enough, I guess you could do that for a little while.
I did it for a little while. I started a computer repair business and realized when I did the calculation, I was only making $12 an hour.
Well, guess what? It's sad stories, and mine is out there. I wished I'd have been making $12 an hour when I got started.
Well, I got started probably a little later than you.
Yeah. But the things that I just talked about, those three things, is finding and finding the deals and closing them. Making the money on the back end. And then thirdly, managing the business, if you know what I'm saying. So a lot of it is like what you were talking about earlier, the marketing. We got to market in a way that we can get people that want to see us, work with us, know us, whatever. And
find manual processes and try to automate them. I mean, it's easier said than done, but a website is a start. These sort of videos help get messages out, and there's people that do good videos, there's people that do bad videos, and hopefully our videos will get better. But that's part of agile, that's part of bootstrapping, right? I remember some very famous YouTubers, and they first started with a smartphone in their car talking about stuff.
Oh yeah,
and
exactly.
now they have professional studios. But it's not about the money. It's about, like, I want a third person to get on here that's a business owner struggling, or I want someone that's seeking out, or someone that's can advise us and advise the group to join, or people put comments and go, hey Blake, I really want to know how to make my digital funnels work, or hey Ted, tell me what you've learned and tell me how to do this. Like, that's what we need, and it's going to grow from there.
Indeed. Well, Blake, I've totally enjoyed this visit with you, and
of course,
I
me too.
would like to have some more. We don't want anyone else to get it. We want to, if we can help anybody there, or some magic happens, that's our prayer. I am not Muslim, but the Muslims are going into Ramadan. They've asked that everyone in the world fast and pray today. I'm up for that.
We all need to unite. I mean, that's the biggest thing, is like, I'm sick and tired of these silos. I'm sick and tired of these divisions. And like you said, I'm not Muslim. I love a few Muslim people. They've been one of my best mentors, Yusuf Chowdhury in San Antonio, who taught me a lot of great things. Like, there's too many divisions. Like, we can talk Republican, Democrat, we can talk religion, we can talk all this stuff. Like, stop, people. We all have a unified mission.
Right. And I'm all for as unity, especially in these hard times, where we see past our differences and we focus on what we can do to be of help to other people. And I think the prayer and the fasting, we certainly need God's help. It's just no doubt about that. May He help us, please.
I know.
That's
so yeah, let's get something on a regular schedule. I mean, let's do this.
I'll get back with you, and I like Friday afternoons for this, and I'm going to
that works.
Other people, and we'll go from there. Well, hey,
and then we'll put it out on YouTube. I mean, maybe we can figure out how to get this live eventually.
Sure.
It'll grow.
Blessings to you. May you have a great weekend. I'm going to end the meeting and ride off into the sunset for now. But I'll probably, I'll be communicating with you over the weekend, and we'll figure this out for the future. All right.
Excellent. I appreciate it, Ted. Amen, brother.
All right. You take care, my man. God bless. Bye-bye.